Among the green hills in Victoria's Golden Plains Shire, a Victorian egg farm is back to full production a year on from Australia's worst avian influenza outbreak. Avgo Eggs in Meredith sits between two of Victoria's largest regional cities, Ballarat and Geelong. It's one of three businesses egg farmer Brad McAuliffe owns that helps to produce 4 million eggs a week to keep up with Australia's rising demand for the popular protein. Avian influenza A, H7N3, also known as bird flu, was powerful enough to take down this farm in 2024. It was one of 6 on Australia's east coast that were quarantined, resulting in mass egg shortages nationally. Brad first noticed something was wrong after a small decline in the number of eggs his flock was producing. 2 of his farms were in lockdown for 12 months due to 2 different strains. He was forced to cull more than 500,000 birds.
In revenue, it was tens of millions that we lost in revenue for that year.
Since March this year, there have been no cases reported to the federal government, prompting the department to declare H7 bird flu eradicated. Brad McAuliffe is not convinced.
I think the disease is going to come back. It's obviously very prominent in our free-range flocks. We can't help migrating birds mingle with our girls outside.
He spent millions of dollars safeguarding his property to keep the virus out. Landline experienced just how comprehensive that is when we visited.
So obviously what we've done here is just an automated wheel wash. So any vehicles entering the farm at any one time get a full undercarriage wash and also an arch wash. It's a very busy highway we've got here, so there's a lot of poultry that runs up and down the road. We're sanitising all our equipment.
Visitors must scan a QR code to enter, as well as meeting a series of strict requirements.
QR code system obviously tracks everywhere where they've been. So, for example, when we go into here and we scan into here, it'll log us into the system, and then if we try to scan into a site that we're not allowed into, it simply won't allow us to in.
Once inside the property, the measures intensify.
We're about to complete a process called showering on to be able to gain access to the poultry and production floor just in this shed. It's one of many biosecurity measures that Brad has introduced on his farm, and it's a pretty important one. It stops the introduction and spread of pathogens from coming in via people's clothes, their hair, or even their skin, and it only takes a few minutes.
Inside the sheds, visitors dress in clothes provided by Brad's company, and for each room, there are specific rules to follow.
So obviously you can see we've got the swing over benches here. So the purpose of the swing over benches is to literally sit down, and we remove the black boots, which are outside boots, and then we swing across and we place the white boots on, which are based for inside only. So this helps with just mitigating any risks around what contaminants we could have picked up outside.
Behind the next wall is where workers sort the eggs.
All the eggs are packed onto these plastic fillers, and they go from here off to a grading facility that we've got based in North Geelong. So the idea of the fillers is they can go through an intensive wash, they get hot washed and sanitised, same with the pallets and the dividers. So then we're able to utilise them throughout the other farms, and let's say if there was any disease outbreak on this farm, we're not transferring it from farm to farm.
There's more sanitation before entering the final shed where the poultry live.
We've changed our boots, and now we're also sanitising, and this is diluted with a disinfectant to make sure that nothing gets transferred into the shed.
Brad's also invested in new technology that provides critical live data on the health of his chickens. Previously, he'd relied on spreadsheets to monitor the health of his birds.
And how often do you check this?
This gets checked 4 times a day, and it also goes back to the farm manager's phone and goes through their whole phone and the whole software. The key part of this is if we see any slight drop in feed consumption, water consumption, egg production, we look at mortality. And then we go, righto, what's happening in the shed? What's happening in that environment to cause these girls to go off the lay or to not eat as much or to not drink as much water?
So far, these measures have prevented bird flu from returning. Bird migration is seasonal, and millions of wild birds are now returning to Australia for the spring. Now, a new threat looms with a new strain of avian influenza A, H5N1.
We've seen the H5 bird flu in other countries have a really serious impact. Countries are spending billions of dollars dealing with outbreaks.
It emerged in China in 1996, and like its H7 relative, it spread from migrating wild birds to poultry, typically infecting free-range chickens via direct contact with diseased wild birds or their contaminated environments. But in 2022, the virus mutated to a particularly nasty strain called Clade 2.3.4.4b.
This H5 virus has proven really difficult to control. So H7, once it becomes this lethal variant, tends to stick to chickens like glue. And so what we can do is we can go in and we can cull all the chickens and stop the outbreak in its tracks. But this H5 virus that's causing the global animal pandemic, it is circulating in everything, not just chickens, but also wild birds and also dairy cattle and also marine mammals. And so our traditional approaches of control are failing quite miserably.
It's already killed millions of animals across the globe, including 17,000 poultry birds in Brazil, leaving the world's largest exporter of chickens no choice but to temporarily ban imports, declaring it an animal health emergency. In the United States, it's infected 1,000 dairy cattle herds across 17 states, and the number is still climbing. In Japan, it's been detected in seals and sea otters, and the United Kingdom reported the world's first ever case in sheep. Australia is the only continent free of the mutant strain, but experts say it's only a matter of time.
This H5N1 arriving to Australia, it's going to happen. I can't tell you when, and I can't tell you by which route, but I think it's almost certainly going to happen. And the reason I believe that is because it has crossed oceans multiple times. It has even gotten into Antarctica, which is a really remote place, and has spread around Antarctica as well. And so the fact that we are an island is not necessarily going to protect us anymore.
15 species of flying seabirds and penguins have been infected in Antarctica. Australia has among the toughest biosecurity laws in the world, but there's no way of stopping wild birds from crossing the Southern Ocean to arrive here. The threat is also heightened around this time of year as hundreds of thousands of water birds migrate from all over the world to Australia in search of food and warmer weather. Scientists go into surveillance mode.
In fact, the mutton birds only returned to Phillip Island last week after spending their non-breeding period in the Bering Sea as well as the Sea of Japan. And so what we're doing right now is actually going out to as many places as we can to sample these arriving migratory birds to ensure that they don't have this high pathogenicity avian influenza with them.
The National Farmers Federation fears there could be a widespread impact on our $70 billion agricultural industry.
What's really concerning for the agriculture sector is that we had understood this virus to impact poultry farms, and poultry farmers are acutely aware of the risk, but now we know that livestock producers and farmers as landholders are going to have a far greater level of responsibility if this virus arrives on Australian shores, and also the impact possibly will be far greater than we ever realised.
The federal government is investing more than $100 million to better understand what the country is up against. Virus ecologist Michelle Willer is one of dozens of leading health experts working on the federal government's bird surveillance program, tracking infected birds in and around Australia. She's currently testing samples from birds collected in Antarctica.
We think we understand how it's spreading, but sometimes it surprises us. So our historical knowledge is that ducks are really important. But in Antarctica, there are no ducks. It's spreading through other routes. So there is a massive capacity for further research into understanding the epidemiology, ecology, evolution, as well as the virology of the virus itself and the mutations, specifically those mutations that could make it better spreading in mammals.
The Antarctica program is just one of many birdwatching operations conducted here and abroad to keep Australia free of H5N1 for as long as possible.
We do expect it will come to Australia at some point, but we're as prepared as we can be and we've invested early.
The federal government is also boosting funding for its national surveillance program, hosting a series of mock drills with industry experts to test the country's preparedness when it arrives, called Exercise Volaire. Authorities also working on a Plan B.
We have, of course, purchased vaccines for human health. We've purchased vaccines that we're testing for wildlife. We have put in additional funding for, captive wildlife of threatened species.
Wildlife experts fear the impact H5N1 will have on native species will be catastrophic.
We only have to look to South America to see what we could face in Australia. So it arrived only in late 2022 in South America, swept quickly down the continent within a few months, wiped out at least 650,000 wild birds, tens of thousands of mammals. They lost something like 40% of Peru's pelicans, 95% of the elephant seal pups in Argentina. So the potential for really large-scale deaths is really high.
The expert advice for farmers is to limit contact between wild birds and poultry, to practice strict hygiene on site, to monitor any birds for illness, and to immediately report any sick or dead birds to authorities. But even with these biosecurity measures, farmers like Brad McAuliffe fear it's not going to be enough to keep the virus out.
Look, I don't think there is any solution. I think it's inevitable. As an industry, we're doing everything we can. We're waiting for the next knock on the door and, it's not a matter of if, but when.
The last bird flu outbreak caused mass egg shortages and a spike in prices across the country. Brad says if the government doesn't back down on its transition away from caged eggs, bird flu numbers will rise and so will egg prices.
If you're going to have the birds let outside and mingle with wildlife, and that's what the consumer's demanding, there's going to be no way to mitigate it. There's so much we can do. All these biosecurity measures do have a cost and a burden on the industry that we have to maintain. So managing that and obviously investing in that is a big cost to us. So if you do see the egg prices go up a little bit in the retail market, it's not going into our pockets, it's going into protecting the birds.
While major supermarkets like Coles agreed to extend the timeline caged eggs will remain on its shelves by 5 or more years due to avian influenza outbreaks, Woolworths and Aldi haven't committed, but are expected to follow suit. The federal government says reconsidering the national standard to phase out caged egg farming by 2036 isn't a decision for them.
We're as practical as we can be, but that is really a matter for the states and the territories. They would be the ones that would need to change their position on that.
In the meantime, while researchers try and figure out the virus's next move, they're calling for all the help they can get.
If you are out doing a bushwalk or out by the beach and you see any sick or dead birds, it's really, really important that you notify us by calling the Emergency Animal Disease Watch hotline.